that their national interest, indeed their greatest national interest, is in fact the strengthening of this organization. Many are still prepared to act in pursuit of what they consider to be their immediate aims. They don't even seem to mind if this leads to a weakening of this organization. But the United Nations is vital to all of us. Without it, we shall all go under. Thus, its strengthening must be the supreme national interest, and the realization of this in a small way would be the beginning of wisdom for all member states and could bring about a wondrous change in the prospects for world peace. This change could be immediately effective in will be signing it today. In his report, the Secretary General goes on to speak of colonialism and points a finger at the colonial powers. I share his view. I share his impatience. All my political life, I have fought against colonialism, and I am proud of the part that we have played in the peaceful transition from dependence to independence and from empire to commonwealth. I hope that no one will try to reverse this process, and that there will be no neo-colonialism or interference with hard-won independence. For their part, the British government are guided and shall continue to be guided by the principle that the interests of the inhabitants of the territories for which they still have responsibility are paramount. Britain stands ready to give independence to territories that want it and can sustain it. Certain problems of decolonization remain. It is inevitable that these are some of the most difficult. They cannot be settled by a mixture of theory and enthusiasm. They are practical problems which need practical solutions. We are happy to have your help, provided it is offered impartially in the true interests of the people concerned. Judge the problems impartially and objectively. It may be thought in some sectors that because our approach is liberal and humanitarian, that we can be forced into hasty and partisan solutions. This is not so. Our objective is clear, and we intend to reach it in an orderly and a fair-minded way. Let this indeed be, as our President asked, the assembly of reason. And I'd like to go on from that to say, if I may, a word about South Arabia. In South Arabia, we have undertaken that the country will become totally independent by 1968. If it is then to go forward into independence in a united and viable condition, fortified by international goodwill, it is essential that in the meantime, the present dissensions should be ended, and that its people should be brought to agree upon the ways in which they can peacefully settle among themselves the shape of their own future. It is, I believe, within the power of the United Nations to make a decisive contribution to the achievement of these aims. Early this year, of the Arabian Peninsula would, I think, be natural for me now to turn to look at Rhodesia. In our view, the Commonwealth leaders' meeting in London last month was a meeting of cardinal importance. We were united in reaffirming our determination to bring the rebellion to an end. We were united on the fundamental principles of non-discrimination between the races and the building of a society, just society, based on equality for all. The British government made clear Rhodesia. My colleagues also made clear that unless the illegal regime in Rhodesia was prepared to take the initial and indispensable steps whereby the rebellion was brought to an end and executive authority vested in the governor, certain related consequences would ensue. Given the full support of Commonwealth representatives at the United Nations, the British government would be prepared to join in sponsoring in the Security Council before the end of this year a resolution providing for effective and selective mandatory economic sanctions against Rhodesia, would withdraw all previous proposals for a constitutional settlement, and in particular would not be prepared to submit to the British Parliament any settlement which involved independence before majority rule. One thing is quite clear. Britain and the Commonwealth together are determined to see this issue resolved on a basis which is both just and honourable to all. But time is running out. In the same way, Mr. President, to address myself for a moment or two now, I don't want to delay you by going back over past history or into allegations and counter-allegations. But all the same, let us not delude ourselves. Hanoi has, in fact, blocked the way to progress through negotiations and a political settlement. President Johnson recently announced in Detroit his willingness to accept a timetable for withdrawal from South Vietnam if North Vietnam would do the same. So far, I know of no response. Now again, at this 21st Assembly, Mr. Goldberg has announced the willingness of the United States government to stop all bombing of North Vietnam the moment they receive any assurance that the cessation would be met by a prompt reciprocal act of de-escalation from the other side. He also raised again the possibility of a timetable for a supervised, phased withdrawal of all external forces from South Vietnam. So far, we have looked in vain for a response. But even so, I'm convinced that there is now common ground in the 1954 Geneva agreements, which both the North Vietnamese and the United States have said can be a basis for a settlement. This being so, I repeat to Mr. Gromyko from this world rostrum the invitation which I made to him from the Labour Party conference in Brighton. I invite him to join with me in reconvening the Geneva conference. I would be glad if we were able to do so today. Bearing in mind the Geneva